Splatoon 3 has a lot of weapons, but even with this variety, there are competitive players who primarily focus their attention on one weapon. These players are known as one-tricks in the competitive scene. Being a one-trick can have several advantages and disadvantages when attempting to win tournaments. So to explore this puzzle piece of being a one-trick player in the competitive scene of Splatoon, I invited Nine, one of the best analysts and commentators for the Splatoon scene. This conversation between Nine and I cover the challenges of being a one-trick, what it takes to reach top level, and the contrast in one-trick and pickup culture in the West and the Japanese Splatoon scene. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what other competitive Splatoon topics you'd like to hear. With that out of the way, enjoy the video. I remember seeing like someone talk about one tricks on an online discussion, and I was like, that's really interesting. We don't really get like those type of discussions nowadays. So I was like, let me reach out to a few people and reach out to Nine to see what are the conversations or the thoughts on one tricks in a competitive setting. So thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can make this into a good video like last time.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. This is a fun topic, and you kind of said it right there, but I guess to vocally preface everything that I'm about to say, it's a very deliberate disclaimer. This is strictly competitive play, and more specifically, I'm interested in talking about it in a high-level competitive tournament play format. You know, people, of course, can play whatever weapons they want. We all have different goals in the game, and that's okay. We all find different things satisfying, but I don't want to dilute any of the discussion with the classic people should be able to play what they want. I'm not against that in any way, shape, or form, but you know, we're talking turkey here. This is serious business, this competitive Splatoon stuff.
Yeah, and one tricks, for people that may not know what that means, it's basically someone that plays a weapon 99% of the time. Maybe you'll probably see them switch off, but just to kind of get the ball rolling on this conversation, for you, when you think of one tricks, like what comes to mind in the competitive setting of Splatoon?
I've always viewed him as a sort of novelty, I guess you could say, because Splatoon is a series that sort of prides itself on how many weapons there are. If you're taking all of the weapons over all of the games, there's hundreds of weapons. And I know some people who've stuck with the same weapon in every single game over the course of nearly 10 years now. So I do think it's a novelty in some sense. It, of course, deepens the challenge, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, when you're playing against other competitive players who aren't really restricting themselves to it. But, you know, I've always looked at one tricks as a question, almost. A question that they have to answer. And it's a pretty simple one, which is, are they one tricking with the intent to win their games and tournaments? Or are they one tricking because they're concerned with the famous quote, pushing your weapon? You know, are you playing the weapon to win, or is the win for you simply playing the weapon? And what does pushing your weapon look like to you? That's the core of it all. You know, if you're looking at Splatoon through the lens of one weapon, you have to be really deliberate in how you're preparing and how you're playing and whatnot. So I think that over the years, there are, of course, different definitions of what a one trick truly is. As you kind of noted earlier, it's rare, even amongst the true specialists, to truly only play one weapon. I mean, even Adori, who's the legendary god roller himself from Japan, even he switches to Slosher every once in a while. But I think we got to kind of set the table here in terms of like the broader discussion around one tricks, I think, which is, you know, how do we define a successful one trick? If you don't mind me kind of taking that direction. Because, I think that's sort of an important thing. And I want to, I guess, sort of frame how I look at what a good one trick player is in the competitive context. Because in Splatoon, fair or not, it's a binary, right? You win or you lose. And unfortunately for viewers and commentators and analysts, that's sort of where the line gets drawn in a lot of respects. If two players of the same weapon are up against each other, like let's say, I don't know, two squeezers, two anything, who's the better player of that weapon, right? If it's just one game, you can say, oh, squeezer B lost the game, but they carried, right? It was just their team. So you start to extrapolate and look game after game after game. And over the course of multiple tournaments and multiple games, if you're the better player, but you're losing games in a competitive setting, it's kind of hard to justify saying that that's a better player of a specific weapon, excluding solo queue, which is a whole different category. But I say that to make this bold statement. I think in most cases, the best one-trick player of a given weapon is probably not as good at that weapon in the context of winning or losing a game of Splatoon than a top player, especially within North America and Europe. Right? I have no reason to think that Kyo wouldn't be the best NA Dreadbringer if he cared about it, right? Again, defining the best one-trick player as the player that wins the most games and happens to be using their one-trick weapon, right? Like, Ice could be the best vanilla jet squelcher, right? Would probably get the most wins. And that's because at a certain point in Splatoon, every weapon has to learn to play at a certain pace and a certain level of execution. And I know that it seems a little unrelated to the idea of one tricks, but I think that the problem that a lot of one trick players run into, and this is sort of slipping into another question I know you had kind of sent to me, is that a lot of one trick players don't have enough practice in a top level environment through a variety of reasons. And they won't be able to contribute in a practical setting, regardless of their mastery of a weapon, right? Mm-hmm. You know, if you're restricting yourself to one weapon as one tricks do, it's even more important for you to be exposed to all sorts of scenarios and game states and situations there, so you know how to deal with them. At some point, you as mini Splatling, let's say you're a mini Splatling one trick. At a certain point in a game, because of how Splatoon plays, every weapon has to be able to find ways to contribute. At a certain point, your mini Splatling is going to be the first person to the enemy plat when you're making a push. Like, we've played enough games to know, like, yes, ideally you'd like your engagement weapon to be the first to the fight, but sometimes the game calls for your support weapon to move forward and attack, and you better be ready to do that. And in order to learn how to do that, you need to be in that scenario a lot of times. And this kind of goes to another piece of the one-trick puzzle. I think a lot of people look at the appeal of one-tricking a weapon as, I know all the tricks of this weapon. I have mastered this weapon. I want to push it as far as I can. I want to learn every angle, every interaction with all of these weapons. Ignoring the fact that competitive Splatoon severely limits the number of weapons that you play, right? We're not playing every single weapon in competitive play. A lot of them have been filtered out. I just don't think that those scenarios come up enough, right? If you're a Dynamo roller and you know the very last pixel of ink that you can hit somebody as they're retreating with on your verticals, right? That's cool. That's great. And it makes a lot of sense in the training room. But I don't know that that comes up enough to be valuable. Can you quickly get to the right spot in a game? Can you hit, I don't know, some cracked 52 gal behind their wall or as they're moving at you with Tacticooler? Can you identify the moment to crash and move at the opponent's pivot where they're trying to get set up as they've got their Tacticooler stat going, as they've got their big bubbler set up, whatever it is, right? Those are the scenarios that you're going to run into every game. You need to be able to deal with those common scenarios with your one-trick weapon. And you have to be exposed to those all over a number of different, we'll say, maps, different modes. And I think that that's hard to do if you're, not with a group that is accepting of it or things of that nature. But it's independent of your weapon choice. I know to this point, I've sort of picked on maybe weaker weapons because, there are Slosher one tricks, of course. There are shooter one tricks. Right. There are Squeezer one tricks. But everybody has to answer that question, right? Can you, with your one trick weapon, find consistent answers to the common game states in Splatoon? And I think if all you're doing is one tricking, especially with a static team, which is what I see a lot of Western one trick players do, that's a tall order to come up with over and over.
And I think that's a very interesting point. And I'm glad you brought up static teams because it raises more thoughts and challenges that one trick players may experience versus somebody who is a bit more flexible with their weapon pool. For our viewers out there, well, what is a static team? And why is that an important element in this whole discussion about one tricks and reaching top level?
Well, I guess to define static team, let's also talk a little bit about what the opposite is too, which is a pickup. So a static team, I guess for the simplest definition here in this chat, let's put it as a group that you play with, we'll say, I don't know, 80 to 90% of your games with. We'll say it's a team of 4 to 5. And for the most part, let's say that it's a normal buildup of meta weapons, right? It's you and a few friends. You enter most weeklies, majors together with that group, and it doesn't really change, right? You'll play some solo queue. You might have 1 or 2 people sub in or out, depending on who's available. But for the most part, you're getting most of your games in with just those 4 other players or 3 other players, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to if you're a player who plays mostly on pickups, you might have 3 different teammates every single time you enter a tournament. Every weekly, you've got another group of people you're playing with, people you're familiar with, let's say, people of similar skill level to you. But the point is, you're not playing every game with the same 4 people.
A consistent 4, yeah.
Right, a consistent 4. And the reason that I bring that up is kind of the thesis statement of what I've been saying here is that it's very important in high and top level Splatoon to play a lot of games against strong opponents and be exposed to a variety of situations so that you have consistent answers for it, because we all know Inklings die really quick.
Mm-hmm.
One little mistake, you fall on a bomb or you get shot and the whole concept falls to pieces. So you got to have consistent answers, and you've got to be quick. You've got to react quick. We move too fast and we die too quick for that to not be the case. I think that if you're in a static team, you are artificially limiting the scenarios that you can expose yourself to. And that is partially because if you're playing with the same team comp and the same players, we all sort of have the same tendencies game after game after game. We develop, sure, over time and we learn more, but for the most part, if you're playing with the same group of 4 or 5 people, you're going to generally reprise the same sorts of games, the same sorts of weapons. And you can get pretty far with that. I want to be clear. A static group of 4 players, as we've seen from, famously FT Win all those years ago, and still now, although it's a slightly different team, you can really make it work with the same core of players, sub that last one out. We're not all FT Win, right? Let me be clear. And let me also be clear that every member of FT Win has 3 times the high level game practice that you do. So let's also be clear about that. We play by the law of the average here. And I think it's worth examining, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the Japan side of this as well. It's worth examining if you're being somewhat held back in your understanding of what your weapon can do, of the scenarios that you're exposed to, by simply playing with the same static 4 players. I know there are advantages in doing that. We can talk about callouts and things of that nature, but I think you have to be able to answer the call in a lot of different points in the game that you can't communicate. And you only can answer those moments through experience. And if you haven't experienced it enough, you're going to run into that problem. And I think you experience it more if you're willing to shake things up, play with a different team. And it gives you the chance to play with other one tricks too, which is, I guess, kind of another fun aspect of this.
It sounds like one of the challenges to being a one trick is getting your exposure to the experience. So you're not just limiting your weapon pool per se, but you're limiting the type of exposure and experiences you can get from different weapons and from different players. Because my experience from talking to one tricks is that they've always told me they have a hard time finding pickups, because sometimes let's say someone plays blaster. Well, we already have a blaster player. We kind of don't want to play double blaster in a zones only tournament. Would you say that's like one of the challenges that one tricks may experience in the scene?
Oh yeah, I mean, you've heard it from different people, and it's still as old as time. Typically, if a team has a player of a specific weapon type, that's it. Heaven forbid that you're a Slosher one trick. I mean, everybody's got a Slosher player at this point. Where are you gonna go? And again, this sort of like leads back into the static team culture. I do think that it can hurt advancement opportunities or just this exposure. I think it's really difficult if you're playing, especially if you're one tricking an uncommon weapon, right? People have limited time. They don't want to enter tournaments with a player who plays a weapon, no matter how good, if they think it's going to hurt their chances of success. Take like I don't know, you could be in a really amazing Dynamo player, and you might even get to kick the tires with a team and enter a weekly with that Dynamo player, right? But if they're a static team and the only reason you got to sub is because, I don't know, one of their other mains was out, I mean, how many times does that Dynamo player get enough chances to really prove that they can play well? Probably not all that many, because they're just going to get pushed back out once the regular player comes in, or worse yet, in my opinion, they become a pick that comes in every once in a while. You get to come in on good Dynamo maps. And I personally, for me, when I was competing, that was even worse to hear. It's like, oh, you mean I can't, I'd rather be a free agent and try again. I don't want to come in for like 2 maps and then just cheer everybody on. I know everybody's different, but yeah, no, it absolutely makes things more difficult for you. You're either playing one-tricking a really common weapon, and every team has one of those, or you're one-tricking a weapon that people don't really want to try. And then you sort of have to luck out and get in with a group of people that you're friends with, or, you know, you just find a situation that works, or you group together with people on Sendo queue and kind of cut your teeth that way. But yeah, it's, you know, you want to play against strong opponents all the time. It's the only way to get better, regardless of your weapon. And it's never easy in any circumstance, but I agree entirely. It is harder if you're limiting yourself to one weapon.
And I think that's a really important thing that I wanted to point out was this whole video is about one tricks in general, right? But it is really important to note that not all one tricks have the same experience when it comes to playing in competitive. I'm thinking in my head, you're saying like a one trick Dynamo, or like even something like a one trick, I don't know, Undercover. That's very uncommon competitive play versus something like a one trick Stamper, which may open up different doors for you, right? Like someone who's in a static team may be like, I might prefer playing with the one trick Stamper as opposed to the one trick Dynamo, because the Stamper can provide more opportunities and it's flexible moving around depending on different metas, right? Whereas like you said with Dynamo, it might be good for like maybe Flounder Heights, maybe Mako Mart, but Stamper can be good on those stages too, and plus more.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, listen, we're not looking at Squeeze or one tricks the same way we're looking at that Undercover Brella one trick. And you know, I guess to kind of step even further back a little bit, I'm not going to rate a Slosher class one trick like yourself in the same way that you would a Charger class one trick, right? I made a tweet, I guess probably about a month ago now, kind of a joking tweet of like, hey, the Slosher is always going to find work in this economy, kind of poking fun at the idea of, if you are a good Slosher player, you will always find a group to play with. Maybe it's only Sendo queue, maybe it's, you know, you're just hopping in and out of different teams. But if you want to find a team to build around or just to sub in on, you're gonna find it. There's no question about it. Sloshers will always have a place. Chargers, there's one Charger you're gonna get to play, and that's it. So if you don't like to play that, Snipe Rider 5H, sorry. Or, you know, worse yet, every team probably already has their backline player and they don't want another one to come in. So you can get back to your solo queue, friends. But yeah, I think it's sort of just analyzing the understanding of a weapon's given place as Splatoon as a whole, right? I mean, if you're a shooter, one trick, you're always going to be able to fulfill a specific role. Whatever it is, you look at what a weapon is meant to do and any practical application of that idea. You know, your blaster. Yeah, we've all played the game long enough to know what these different weapon classes are meant to do.
Right.
And then kind of within that context, you can judge how a given player or weapon is performing within their one trip class. That's sort of like steps around it, or the original question. But I think it is worth looking at that sort of clarification.
Speaking of top level and high level in that sphere, there have been one tricks that have pushed it to, per se, the limits in a way. So for example, Majin with Kaiser, notably for being a Rapid Blaster Pro player. And we're kind of seeing up and coming players like Len playing Blaster primarily. From your experience watching this game, and I think we could focus mainly on Splatoon 3, how do you feel one tricks have performed in a competitive setting in the West?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, you know, it's a tough question to answer because, you know, we have to judge all the one tricks that also drown in pools, right? I mean, if we're going to really look at the scene as a whole, no, that's kind of poking fun there. One tricks I think absolutely have succeeded in many respects. I mean, I would say depending on how loosely we're defining one tricks, I think that you could even look at the very, very top level teams and point out a number of different one tricks. So I think that, there are core weapons, there's core roles, and that's sort of why I talked a little bit about the idea of a weapon's place in Splatoon as a whole. Not necessarily a meta, just what that weapon is meant to do. And I think that because of that, there will always be room for a one-trick player to play around the rest of what's going on. I've sort of kind of harped on this idea of exposure to different scenarios and making the best of every situation that you're in, reacting, the decision-making aspect of Splatoon being just as important as some of the other aspects of it. And of course, the execution side. If you have all of those and you have, 3 teammates that do the same, you're going to find ways to get wins. And I think, Majin is a great example of someone who has played that role so long and played it with so many different players, right? Majin has been to Worlds twice, as performing for Europe. He's won a number of different tournaments. He's beaten teams like FT Win before. Like, he's gone up against top Japanese squads. There's not a scenario that the guy hasn't run into, and it's why he's able to make his one trick work. He's a top player. He's a top player that one tricks. And I think you will continue to see those types of scenarios in the game. Orion's another great example with Graveyard Shift. These one tricks do have unique technology, I guess, to really aggrandize it. They have some unique things that they can put at your opponent. And it's true that they're sometimes not going to be ready for it. But you have to have a very high level of fundamental Splatoon skill in order to achieve that point. And I think we will continue to see it because, man, some players are real, real good at this game.
Yeah, and it seems like you're really pointing out to the aspect of exposure. And I think that's what people need, that practice to see how their weapon plays in a top level competitive setting and how it performs. Can this weapon accomplish what it needs to be doing in this particular setting at this time? It's not just the weapon itself. There was a question I also sent you, but before we get to that one, I kind of want to pivot to Japan, because from my observation, and you could clarify more on this, every time I watch Area Cup, there's always some one-trick player that I'm seeing there that is more of an unusual weapon, right? Like, I was just watching Area Cup earlier today, and I saw Ko playing Bucket, and that's what they play, Bucket. But then sometimes I'll see like a Gluga one trick, which is more unusual. Like you were saying, Bucket is always going to work in this economy. Sometimes not all dualies do. CDS was also used in a recent Area Cup. What is the context of one tricks in Japan?
This has been something that's come up for years, right? I mean, I analyzed an Area Cup back in Splatoon 2 where the winning team of an Area Cup used 4 Ink Mine weapons. And let me tell you, go back, check your stat sheets, folks. Look at the weapons that had Ink Mines back in that game. Because I'll tell you, Kenta 52 Gal didn't have Ink Mine, all right? It was not a lot of great weapons that were rolled out that day. But yeah, I think a lot of people love the idea of Japan and their unconventional weapon picks. I mean, there were 2 rollers in grand finals today.
Right.
One of them is a carbon roller one trick. Adori switches between the rollers, but ostensibly the best roller player. There was a Dapple Dualies that got top 4 as well. A Dapple Dualies main. Again, this is the strongest region in the world by player depth, and I would argue even the top players. Some people argue the gap is closed. We can argue that all day. But I do want to sort of clear up one thing at the top of this, which is, Japanese competitive Splatoon isn't a charity by any means. They don't look at these one tricks and say, oh, we'll give you a try here out of the goodness and kindness of our heart, right? There are tangible differences in their scene that I think create this environment where you get to see all of this. I kind of hit on one part of it, which is Japan, certainly the strongest region. Strongest region means more good players. More good players means more good practice. You can follow the flow chart from there. All their players get access to that, not just the one tricks. But the word starts with a P. Pickups. Pickup culture. Oh my goodness. The pickup culture in Japan, so different. If you watched 3 different Area Cups and you followed one player, doesn't matter who it is, top player, you're going to find them with probably a drastically different team every time. There are a couple of pairs that always play together, like Odenex and Azu. They almost always play together. But even those two will go and play on different teams here. And if the word of the day is scenarios and skill sets and differences, there is no better environment than knowing that you can simply hop on with a different team. You're going to get different strategies even with different players, right? Ko, you mentioned, we'll just pick on Ko. Ko and Grando both play Slosher. Play it totally differently. They have very different goals, different angles that they approach from. And you as, I don't know, let's put you as an NZAP player here, you're going to have to play a little differently around Ko than you will around Grando. And, you know, that's same weapon even, but you're getting different exposure. You're building a different sort of skill set. And again, this isn't exclusive to One Tricks, but you see how this alleviates one of the big problems that we discussed earlier that One Tricks have. And again, you know, because there's not pressure to stay with the same 4 players every time, our poor Dynamo roller friend that we brought up earlier, like, you're going to actually get to play now. You're going to get to play every week, and you're not going to be relegated to simply playing on a couple maps that, you know, would help that one static team. And kind of on that idea, though, this is sort of a tertiary point. I don't have any empirical statistical data to back this up, but I do think Japan is generally a little more receptive to X rank power as an indicator of skill.
Right. They feature it a lot.
Yeah, they do. Well, I mean, there are some tournaments that are XP like restricted, and back in the day, in Dynamon's legendary scrim server, like there were scrims that were blocked by X rank power, and I think we all know and have debated for years the validity of X rank power. But at a certain point, you know, the powers that be in Japan were like, well, it's all we've got. Let's just do it here. And you know, I do think that the best players that I know also happen to be pretty good at solo queue, and they put in time in solo queue to stay sharp. It's not all of them, of course, but we're playing by the law of the average here. You know, I don't too often see players luck into a really legitimately high X rank power. You know, you got to put some serious time in, if nothing else, to get there. But I do think that Japan is probably, on average, a little more likely to take our, I don't know, 3,500 XP Dapples player and give him a shot. And again, kind of leaning back into the pickup idea, that Dapples Savant is probably now actually going to get the chance to play with some other really strong players in an event and in multiple events. Oh, I just thought of this as well. Sorry. There's a recurring event in Japan that Redo puts on called the Weapon Unification Cup. This is going to sound crazy gimmicky, but every player on the team has to play the same weapon. So you might think to yourself, oh, like if we ran that here in the West, what you'd have is you'd have a team pick one weapon that everybody could play kind of decently, right? That's typically how those events would type to go. In Japan, all 4 of the best squeezers are like, oh, heck yeah, get at me, bro. 4 best squeezers. Let's do it. This is our team. But then the 4 best splatlings are like, now we're all playing heavy edit. Deal with this. Meanwhile, you know, Ko, Grando, and all the great bucket players are like, I mean, Slosher's pretty good, guys. And then, you know, Melon just gets 3 of his shooter buddies and they run over everybody too. But as fun as this all is, like, if you're playing 4 Exploshers, guess what? Like, at some point, you're going to have to clutch a point blank against a fast weapon, right? But you think about Explosher, one of its weaknesses by design is that it's not good in those scenarios. But if you play in this silly, like, gimmicky event, you're going to eventually run into that scenario. And by eventually, I mean, you're going to run into it immediately, and you're going to have to find a way to deal with it immediately. So just, again, a reception and an idea to these types of events, putting yourself in all of these interesting scenarios that will shore up other aspects of your game. Japan runs a number of different events like that. They run weapon pairing cups, where, again, 2 people will have to enter with just one weapon, and then they're randomly paired with 2 other players with another weapon. So you might get, I don't know, 2 ballpoint splatlings and 2, I don't know, slosh machines. That'd be pretty good, actually. But, you know, you get the idea here. It all puts you into those different scenarios, and leading back into pickup culture, you're getting exposed to a lot of different play styles, and you're shoring up all the gaps in your fundamental play.
And I think that's the interesting part of this whole conversation on One Tricks, because the whole reason I was thinking of the conversation was because someone told me that they wouldn't want to team up with a One Trick because they lack that flexibility. It's interesting how you're saying the scenarios is what's going to help One Tricks in the long run. And because you're putting yourself in places where pickup culture may not like a one trick, your scenarios might be limited.
Yeah, and that's sort of my current view on Splatoon as a whole. We're applying it to the context of one tricks because I think one tricks, because of an insistence of playing one weapon, again, for whatever reason, not trying to dog on that side of it. There is the fact that if you're playing one weapon, that is going to limit your answers to the scenarios that you're running into. And I think that people greatly underestimate, one, the amount of time that top players have put in, the amount of time they consistently put in, and how different and how much faster the game is when you get to that level. And I guess maybe that's a big sweeping generalization of the audience here, but it is so difficult to keep track of everything that's going on in Splatoon, and it's even more difficult to consistently have the right answers to it. And I think that one trick players have to answer that question as well. How do you react in a given moment? How do you answer this with your weapon's different limitations? I don't think that you stonewall yourself out of it entirely. Like, clearly there's evidence. Every single major event, there's always a one trick who's getting something done, as we discussed earlier. But I think that what can happen to a lot of people is and this is a great irony because I did this all the time in fighting games where I would come up, is I would choose to main and only play one character, and then I would complain about that character. And, I'm not talking about, just fun, like, blah, 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 this and that. And I mean, like, I would just legitimately get angry at my character and say, God, like, this character's so bad at this. I hate this aspect. Well, like, I'm the one putting this restriction on myself. And I think that that's just a very human way for a lot of this to go, is you're kind of taking the lumps and trying to get better at a game like Splatoon, where it's very easy to lose very quickly and not really have a lot of tangible, productive things you can take away from the game. So that's, I guess, another sort of mental limitation that you put on yourself, is like, it's very easy to get frustrated at a weapon if it's all that you're playing, but you got to lose a lot before you start to win, and that's true for any game.
It sounds like there's already a limited opportunity in getting that top level experience, considering that they are at the top, right? If we're thinking of like the pyramid scheme, for anybody that's already a flexible player, for example, like let's say you play buckets and blasters, okay, you have that flexibility, you have a role, it's already limited of you getting that experience in top level scrims. But now if you're one tricking a weapon, it seems like those opportunities limit itself even more, and attempting to get that exposure. And it does seem like we have the resources for it, which is what Sendout Q is there for, at least in the West side, right? You were mentioning that in Japan they have their own servers, so they have their ways of figuring things out, and it seems similar to what Sendout Q is trying to do, of not just playing with, like, I mean, you could queue up with any random person on Sendout Q. You could literally create a different pickup every single time if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, and Sendout Q is a fantastic resource, no question whatsoever. You can queue up and get some great games against great players and work through it there. It's it's definitely like the idea of pickup culture, and this has come up in like other conversations I've had with other people of like, is pickup culture better? Should we implement pickup culture? And it's like, well, it's not really something you can implement, right? Pickup culture has been big in Japan for quite some time. They have an entirely different focus in terms of what they want. I mean, we tasted glory when we had, that era that you and I talked about last time in our last chat here on your channel, of all these different teams and the great storylines around the teams. And, we romanticize it for good reason, right? I love those moments. That was such a fun era. Japan went a different direction. A lot of their love is given towards individual players and, the success that these different players come in. And it's not really until you get to the world championship level that you'll, see players and Koshin, that you'll see players start to stick with static teams. So it's just a very different, sort of value system. It happened very organically. So I think that you have to be willing to look at the resources that you do have. And I think you have to sort of, accept your Accept the reality if you're going to one trick, let's say, a weapon that's not thought of as highly as some of these others. Maybe you're trying to push a weapon. I mean, let's take Dreadringer for instance, since I mentioned that one earlier. Dreadringer, I think, is a perfectly serviceable weapon. It can get a lot done in splat zones. It's got different cheese aspects. It's got a good sub weapon. It's got a fine main weapon, and a lot of people are comfortable with the Slosher class. But might not be the first player that people are looking for when they are looking for another player, right? Or maybe like let's take a team, if their Slosher player leaves for whatever reason, you go up to the Dreadringer player and ask them, hey, will you play Slosher for us instead of Dreadringer? And, if you are wholly devoted to just the Dreadringer, maybe you don't get that call. But I think it's, worth looking at your limitations and just being honest about what it is you want out of your experience in Splatoon, and kind of accepting that, hey, if I want to play this one specific weapon, I might not get to play on a top team. The other side of that coin, though, is I think that there's real networking opportunities. And, I see all the time these posts on Twitter of 2900 XP with, I don't know, Squiffer, or 3000 XP with Camo Tentabrella only and whatnot. And that's great. That's awesome. Like, that is a legitimately difficult achievement. As I said earlier, you're not going to stumble into that, especially, if it's a not so strong of a weapon. Reach out to teams, reach out to different players, try to form different pickups. Or I don't know, maybe that Squiffer player and that Tentabrella player should, I don't know, team up for an event and find a couple other players and just take a run at it, take a stab at it. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work out great. You have a few laughs. You've spent your evening playing your favorite game and you go about your business. But yeah, I think there's just sort of an acceptance that you have to have of the restrictions that one tricks are sort of self-imposed with. And, maybe that's not the route that you do want to go. And if not, all the better. There's plenty of fun weapons and plenty of great players.
Well, Nine, that sounded like I was gonna ask you, like, what advice would you give to somebody? So you completely took that question and ran with it. It sounds like what you're saying is like, well, if you're one trick and you see another one trick, and no one else is giving you the opportunity, why not give the opportunity to each other and find out? I mean, I remember there was one time in Splatoon 2 where Gluga Deco, the one with Baller and Wall, wasn't used that much, and then one day it randomly appeared in an area cup, and it just goes to show you got to try different things. And I think this goes back to your other point of like getting that exposure, having that experience, learning how to play with a different weapon, learning how to play with different players, and exposing yourself to those scenarios. And I think that's probably not just good advice for one tricks, but it's really good advice for any player wanting to advance to the next level.
Yeah, and if you need a mental framing of it here, and this sort of goes if you're the one trick or if you're viewer of the one trick there, because that Gluga Deco player, Tiramisu, is the name. Maybe there have been more Gluga Deco players, but that's the one that's famous for running to the top of the world with Gluga Decos when nobody else was. Tiramisu is a 4000 XP player that plays Gluga Decos, not a 4000 XP Gluga Deco. Like, I know we shorthand it here, but I want to be clear. That's a 4000 level player who is choosing to play Gluga Decos. And that's very different of a framing rather than saying a 4000 XP of that weapon. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but like really chew on it for a little bit. And I think that if you are trying to climb the ranks as a one-trick player, that's how you should view yourself, right? You are a 3000 level player, 3000 XP level player, or Leviathan level player, whatever it is, that plays a specific weapon. But there are certain skill sets, certain scenarios, certain experience, reactions, decisions, whatever, that you gain along the way to getting to 3000 XP. You're that player, and you happen to choose a weapon on the other end, on the other side of that. That's how you get your mind right to play it through. That's how you reach out and talk to other players. That's how you prove yourself. And I think that will lead to success, consistency, and a real chance to actually be the very best of your weapon. And you can put that one in your Twitter bio happily, knowing that you won a big tournament and it's not just a title that you've given yourself because nobody else plays your weapon.
And that concludes this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what other topics you'd like for me to cover. I'll see you next time.